is alive. Good morning, everyone. I don't know how many members of the public out there, but I apologize for the late start. We were waiting on a quorum. People had other meetings, but we're ready to go. We're going to pick up on S226, and we're going to go through some of the changes we had discussed yesterday, and then we're going to talk about the home inspector piece in the bill. I'm going to wait till Senator Brock's here for that. Let's post if we haven't the latest draft. I think 55.
The latest draft is posted, and I'm waiting for the copy right now.
Okay. So we're working off draft 10.1, and David, why don't you
That's here.
walk us through the changes in this draft? I think as of yesterday, we had walked through the entire bill except for the home contractor piece. So the changes won't affect.
ADU, where the ADU stuff was, we didn't get to that so much.
Well, we did at the very end. David pointed out that most of it is in the appropriation section. It's on the appropriation section. There are a couple of changes, really.
Okay.
I don't think from yesterday, but so just by page number, direct us to changes you made.
Sure. Good morning, David Hall, Legislative Council. I believe that in the changes since yesterday are highlighted. Your first change is on page 14 in section 10. And this is the sort of the amalgamation of the large employer housing, commercial property conversion, community partnership for neighborhood development, etc. There are extremely minor language changes based on Jen's work that I didn't highlight. The highlights really call out on the bottom of 14, for instance, and at the top of 15 that we're talking about a per unit basis for these grants. And then there's still the question of this large employer concept. I did change this so it's not full-time employees, it's just 100 employees, but there may still be further discussion on that number. It's up to you guys, obviously.
Yeah, in my email last night, I got an email from one of the ski areas that said they were just borderline on 100. And heard the comments of why do we have any number, but I think we want to focus on the large employers. But someone sent me, I thought there was Chris, I think, sent me a definition from some federal program that uses 50 full-time equivalents, which I would feel comfortable going down to. So I really don't want to start funding these kind of grants for a small company with that wants to house one employee, and they have 5. I'm trying to get at the bigger people, but I'd be willing to go to 50.
Did you say 15 or 50? I mean, either way, I was thinking of like hospitals, institutions,
That's one
large.
But there's some statement, why do we have any? And I think we should focus this on the bigger employers who provide multi-units for their workforce, not a small employer. So I think I can get you this definition, but they use 50 full-time equivalents
Instead of 100.
100's a lot. I think 50, for Vermont, that's a lot of employees, 50.
Yep.
So that's still a large employer. And I hear Jen's point, which is why would we limit it? We want any new apartment we can get. But I think your point about this is that this is multi-housing units, not just a single one for an employer of 5 people. So I think I can get that. I think 50 is fine because 50 still for us is very large.
You want to say 50 full-time?
Full-time equivalent.
Yeah.
Full-time equivalent.
Someone asked me a question, which was, if they put funds towards this, is it taxable? And I felt like there were existing ways that it would be treated as taxable or non-taxable, but I just thought I'd throw that out there because someone asked me that and I didn't have a ready answer.
I don't know, you mean the grant, the matching grant, if they got.
If they put money forward, is that tax deductible?
Is the grant taxable or?
I guess I'm trying to figure out, I don't think the grant,
If you're trying to figure out whether it's tax deductible, the matching money that they put in, I'm sure it is. It's like a.
right.
business, yeah,
Let me go back to the email. Let's see if I understand.
but I don't think we should mess around with trying to determine whether these grants are taxable or not. I think just that's a whole other question. I think we just let the chips.
They were asking if the dispersed funds are taxable. So yeah, we don't, I'm okay not answering that. If
I don't know, we have two nonprofits in the room. Your grants to people usually have them paying taxes on those grants.
Jen Haller from Vermont Housing Conservation Board. I'm sorry, but it depends. So if we make an award that's a grant, it's not taxable. If we make awards of certain forms to low-income housing tax credit partnerships, there are things that the partnership does to structure it so that they don't have to pay taxes. So I think in this instance, it's really going to depend on how the business, how the employer structures their investment, and it probably is. Certainly is way beyond what I would be able to
I
speak
think
to.
it's a larger conversation.
Yeah, and it's sort of individual.
You know, if it does turn out to be taxable, then their grant is diluted somewhat, but they're still getting a hefty grant to do that, so it's going to be part of their calculation. I mean, everything is fungible. We could make it non-taxable, and then we could lower the grant amount. So I think it's a door that if the House wants to look through, they can, and we'll be open to what they do. But at this point, if we're trying to get this bill out, which I am this morning, I think it's a question that we have a lot of things in the economic development bill. We don't deal with that either. We don't make those kinds of decisions just yet. So. But it's a good question. I mean, we're dealing with that with finance, with military pay, and, stuff like that. What is, how much is taxable, how much is not. But I would ask them to just leave it as is for now, and committed to peel back the onion as the bill goes forward.
Yeah, I don't recall us ever addressing aspect of grants.
Okay, so let's, I'm looking for yellow.
Well, I think the next substantive set of changes really jumps ahead to the missing middle,
Which is
on page 31.
right.
I also asked you might not have seen it in my email. I did mention that 50, but I also asked you to change the percentage on the administrative amount, the 10% on the bylaw modernization administrative section. So
That's an Ellen section.
okay,
I remember the discussion from yesterday, and that it was at 10, and you guys were talking about lowering it. Is that
yeah, and we've got to bring it from the bottom to lower to 6. So that it is
Right.
I'll make a note of that.
Okay. All right, page 31.
So page 30 is accessory dwelling units, which is only parking still. And missing metal is where we are. Okay.
So I think we're on page 31. What I had suggested was just to break up the 15 million. And I think the governor's proposal was for 5 this year and 10 next year. I could be wrong, but I thought the total was 15.
No, it was 5 for the BAA and 10 for this year. It's 15 for this year.
Right, so then you have to change that. second
Yes,
about-
it's 15 for this year.
No,
Yes, that was for
5 for the BAA.
and 10 for this year, for FY '23. They wanted 15 total for this year. But they wanted some early.
5 in FY '22 and 10 in FY '23. Okay, this says 5 and 15, so we have to change that.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. So it's 15 for FY '23 at this point, because we're not doing, we obviously
Well,
aren't.
if you look at the language, I asked, David had it at 15 for FY '23, and I just wanted to replicate what the governor asked for in case the
Yeah.
bill gets signed. And
Yeah.
just kept up passage, so we just need to say 5 for '22 and 10 for '23. It's totally 50.
I haven't, I wanted to wait for this discussion, but, so that won't make any difference unless you make the $5 million effective on passage.
Right,
Because otherwise, it's all tied to July the 1st, so we're gonna have to,
We need to do that. Yeah.
because otherwise,
This, we can just make this section effective on passage. So do you want to walk us through this subsection B? This is the major change.
sure. So subsection B, this is the use of funds, the question of the direct project subsidy and the shared equity proposals. So one, I believe actually is largely unchanged, so it's still a 35% max subsidy per project. And it is limited to the value gap, difference between the development cost and the assessed value.
And can I just ask a question of people in the audience? Is that your understanding that that 35% is the cap on the value gap portion of this help we're giving out? Or is it 35% total you can't exceed? I mean, this has been here forever. What have people been thinking of as 35%? Chris?
Chris Donnelly, Champlin Housing Trust. The way this reads is that it's a 35% cap on the value gap.
And that is your understanding of what the administration gave us this language. That was their intent.
No, their intent was that it was a 35% cap on the total program. Value gap plus the affordability gap.
That's their intent. So we need to
That was-
change this language.
That was their proposal.
Why did they- So this language is in error or was unclear. They gave us this language. So you're saying that the language says it's on the value gap. Their intent was that it be overall. So they essentially drafted it to do something different than what they intended.
I would have to go back and look at the earlier draft to see if this is the same language.
Pretty sure it is. It says direct subsidy for up to 35% of the eligible development costs. So I read it to be a direct project subsidy, and that is, I read it to be a cap on the value gap. But,
It's this last clause that I don't remember, I don't think was in the earlier draft.
the last clause was something that I drafted to make sure that they didn't go to 35% when they didn't need to go to 35%. But I thought this was all on the, so if we had a $300,000 house, and the most that they could combine total of the subsidy and the value gap would be about 100,000. A third, 35%.
Basically a third subsidy.
And you've had, I think you've had endless discussions about this issue. You always thought that 35% was meant to be the overall, I think at one point, this direct project subsidy was to the developer. I'm fine with the 35% on the overall help,
To
but I
the
don't know.
developer, that is,
No, Chris is saying everybody said that was the total, you know, I don't know if Laura is available. I think she gave us this language of Josh.
That was the intent of the original proposals. 35% would be the total subsidy for both the developer and buy down the cost of the home for the buyer. That was the original proposal from the administration and from VHA.
so I'm confused. I had thought that basically that the value gap grant, you know, it was a direct subsidy to the developer. Isn't that what we're talking about? Does this language, this does include the buyer in this language, so it doesn't just say the developer.
No, so the way I was reading this one was the value gap to the developer, and 2 and 3 was the subsidy to the homeowner. Is there a short version? Is there a word we can use for the second portion?
You called it a discount.
Discount, okay, discount.
It's a discount to the purchaser and a permanent affordability to future purchasers. So there are 3 parties that benefit here: the developer, the current buyer, and the future buyers.
Okay,
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So I guess I'm clear, does this language, they have to be income eligible buyers, but the 35% goes to the developer. And
so David, could you just, you know, we're gonna break and then when you come back with a redraft, hopefully like 11:30 or something, whenever, if you can make that, if we have a chance of getting this done. Can you redraft this to capture the fact that 35% is a cap on both the value gap and also the discount to the homeowner combined, and that the value gap portion to the developer shall not exceed the difference between the home cost and the resulting assessed values. Just make it clear that in terms of their funding, that there's an overall cap of 35% of the purchase price of the house, and there's also a limit on how much which to give in terms of the value gap, which by definition is the difference between assessment and development costs.
forgive me, can I just, so, I mean, this morning I seem to be a bear of little brain. If you take this third off off the gap between the building cost and the assessed value, and that goes to the developer, then how is that value translated into the purchase price for the owner? I mean, does that reduce at the same time the cash goes to the developer, but that sort of the value of that cash to the developer is embedded in the discount to the purchaser?
I think an easier way to look at it is,
Yeah, help me.
there's a purchase price of the house,
Right,
okay? We're helping meet the developer's costs that are above that purchase price, which is essentially around the assessed value, okay? And then we're gonna help the homeowner who can't even afford the assessed value with another subsidy in terms of helping them buy the house. So
okay, so where is that subsidy? That is what
it's two and two and three.
Okay.
Is the example.
that I see. Okay. And what is our notion of, is there a percent that the,
This was, I guess, Maura's idea for an overall cap.
okay,
And I don't know what happens if the value gap is
Big.
35% of the purchase price, then you have no money left to give to help somebody.
exactly, I mean, I guess I'm a little, I mean, yeah. Exactly,
I guess they don't, I guess she was projecting that that wouldn't be the case, or she doesn't want to buy a house that has so much of a value gap. She wants to limit that, so
but,
she's gonna have to work that out. But I'm hearing that their intent is not captured in this language at this point. That's the way I read this language is direct project subsidy. I always thought that meant to the developer.
yeah, me too. So, does, Chris was on briefly, I was so used to it. Does he have any input on this?
I don't know if you would.
That was great. That was a classic Zoom moment.
Yes. You didn't see that, you just,
He came on, he shook his head and laughed.
do you have what you need?
I confess I have no idea. And
Yeah.
it would be
Really?
helpful to me if you could just say to me, like, in plain English, the concept that you want me to translate into legislative language, because I'm very confused about where the money is supposed to go. I understand there's the concept, there's three concepts, because you did articulate those well, which is money that will go to a developer who has to build a house that's probably going to be more expensive than an assessed value, and they're therefore not going to build it because they can't sell it, blah, blah, blah. So we're trying to buy down the developer's cost of building such a house.
Yeah, I
So
get
it
that
will
part.
be a middle income piece of housing. I understand that. It sounds like there's also somehow supposed to be money that I guess VHFA would give to the actual buyer of that house. And I'm not sure what the metric is for how much money they're gonna give that person or how it marries with the project cost. And then there's the third piece, which is sort of unrelated to those, which is some sort of perpetual affordability mechanism, which would either be, I suppose, a deed restriction or a shared equity with Champlain or somebody else that says, we're gonna keep this in the stable of perpetually affordable housing. That I can wrap my head around. I'm not sure how the first two work together and what the cap is supposed to be on.
Right,
You know what I mean?
I agree with you. So it would be, again, this morning, I'm right with David. If you identified 25% went of that gap went to the developer, 10% was then passed on to the initial buyer, it would be clearer for me. Is that what you? But it's not clear to me how this will be, how this buy down will benefit the future purchase, the current purchaser versus the developer. I get the developer piece, that's very simple. But I don't get where the gold dust is here for the current buyer, the first buyer. I think we're okay going forward on future buyers. But what I guess I'm not clear on, and I don't think David is either.
I'll try again.
Okay, sorry,
No, it's not a simple concept, but
so
it's
wait,
basically, we want, on any given home, we don't want VHFA to subsidize it more than 35% total of the construction cost. Within that 35%, they can do the value gap directly to the builder
Right.
and a subsidy to help the homeowner buy the house. So those two checks that they write cannot equal more than 35% of the total development cost.
So then I think it would clarify things in two, to say the agency, well, it does say shall ensure that any funds out of that 35%, I think it would help to say, of that 35%, the agency will ensure. You know, I think that would help clarify that. Would that help, David?
Why don't we, I think I have it, why don't I work with David in the break to come up with some language?
I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't sort of clearly articulate that the agency will be with each individual project. 'Cause my guess is it will be different for each project. Some it may be 30, some, you know, but that there will be, I'd like to see that there'll be no less than 10% of this benefit passed on to the initial buyer. I mean, you could end up with, I mean, in this scenario, you might end up with a very modest benefit for the current buyer. Because I guess my concern, particularly in Chittenden County. Am I crazy?
No, I mean, it's possible.
Oh, Laura has, oh my gosh. You ask and she appears.
Okay, if you've heard the discussion, Laura,
No.
help us out. The one question I have was that 35%, which came from your draft, was that to be the overall help you gave to the project? Or was it just a cap on the value gap?
For the record, Maura Collins with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency, and that was the overall cap that included the value gap and the affordability subsidy.
Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for, affordability subsidy. That goes directly to help the homeowner buy the house. The other check goes to offset the developer's cost in building the house. Is that correct?
And the two pieces combined would be capped at 35% of the total development cost.
Got it. Is there, I mean, I think I get that. I just, is there, and each individual project is different. I get that. So the percent may be different with each project. Is it, at a certain point, it may not be much of a discount for a current buyer if it's much less than 10%. Is it worth?
That is true. If we need 30% of the total development cost to go just to the value gap piece, then it is possible that the affordability subsidy could be quite modest in that situation.
But there's nothing in here that says you can't divide that up any way you want, but the developer may say, unless I get the full extent of that value gap, I won't build the house. So you've got to potentially, somehow you got to marry a developer with a buyer that it works that stays under 35%.
That is correct.
David, I can.
I hear it, I get it.
I can work with you to tweak this language at the break. And it's just.
I think we just need language that says that, yeah.
So the second section is, deals with the affordability gap. It just says that, just adds that affordability gap that VHFA gives initially will stay with the house on subsequent sales. So it's an element of permanent affordability. The third section is that the VHFA would have the discretion, hopefully would prioritize, instead of that affordability subsidy staying with the house, which we heard will get diluted over time
Right.
quickly, they can also utilize, which has been used in mostly, I guess, in Chittenden County, the shared equity model. Say, so that at the time of resale, that they would plow back 75% of the share of the increased equity to reserve the low price of the house. Have you seen this language, Maura? I'm certainly willing to tweak it. The concept, I think we want to stay with, and we're certainly going to work with you as the bill moves forward. But I'm trying to vote this bill out this morning, and this is, I think, the direction we want to go. Give a choice of two ways to do permanent affordability. One is permanent affordability light, I think, and the other is permanent affordability heavy. Like, that's your choice, and we're just trying to send a signal that if you can find a buyer who wants to give up that equity going forward, that would be the way to go. And I don't know if you're working in the dark, if you have the language in front of you or not.
No, I will tell you that I have not had a chance to read this language, and I would love just a moment to do so, and could comment on it. I don't know, I think that's Chris Donnelly in the corner, and I don't know if he has already testified, but I know that we have been in discussions with Chris and CHT as well as the administration, and have made what I think is some really good progress in those discussions. And what I don't know is if the language you're looking at right now reflects that communal goal that we share. And so I am feeling a bit of a loss, but I have nothing more important than this. And so I'd be happy to spend my next few minutes reading through this.
So yeah, take a look, and we'll have you come back later this morning, and we can talk about it. And no, this does not reflect the discussions. I understood that there was no agreement. I'm not sure that even if there was an agreement, that we wouldn't have concerns with what you're proposing. So this in some ways is a placeholder for further discussions to take place in the House. We're open to other ideas, but this just is basically a choice for you for perpetual affordability light or perpetual affordability heavy, with a preference, if you can find the right buyers, to do the typical shared equity model. So it's draft 10.1.
I have it in front of me. Thank you. I just wanted you to know I haven't gotten farther than the first two paragraphs.
31. Chris Donnelly has not testified. He's been helping from the sidelines. Okay, so let's move on. I don't think that language will be that difficult to tweak. The next changes are on page 34.
So shifting gears to,
Is this true? We don't want to. We'll skip over that because I want to wait till Senator Brock comes. Wasn't there some language that you changed dealing with or defining better the shared equity formula? Or Senator Clausen, you said you were going to work on.
No, I took on smart growth.
Smart growth, I'm sorry.
And Ellen presented that yesterday.
Okay.
But shared equity is the bailiwick of these two incredible experts in the corner.
You know, I guess my feeling on, if you look at this, is the parties know what it means, and there are also there's enough of a definition in the new word.
Right, that's where we sent it, to the section that actually defines it. So I'm happy with where we are on this, with the honest changes, and I think Katie is as well. Okay, so where are we now? David said 34.
If you're gonna skip all of the contractor registration, then
Yep.
that takes us to page 45.
Okay, and this is the ADU work,
You know,
which I hope includes all the stuff that was in our, I have a list of all the
I think
ADU
it
stuff.
does, but on page 44, I had a question of, is this the way, that's what happens if it's not enacted or, you know, if the terms change from S210, how does that impact what's now on page 44?
Well, I think, I don't know why you might have a different page than me. I assume you're referring to section 31, 32, which for some reason is my page 45.
Yeah, it's my page 45 too, on the hard copy.
Oh, well, I have it for says page 44.
That's so weird. I don't know what that's about.
No, neither do I.
At any rate, I know what you're talking about. But at some point, these are just going to have to be reconciled. I mean, the way that S210 crafts the Vermont Rental Housing Investment Program is it creates a new section of law that doesn't exist.
Right, exactly.
So this bill is trying to amend the section of law that doesn't actually exist. So you have two options. I mean, you can, if they both pass, then they would be harmonized after passage, and this would modify that.
Right.
I constructed this way so that this doesn't actually do anything if S210 doesn't pass, because it can't amend the law that wasn't enacted. So, is this even a way to actually mechanically accomplish this? I've never done this before.
Okay.
But this is my attempt to not have to repopulate this bill with all of S210.
Right, which is what I asked David to do. I mean, he originally had the whole.
Right.
Here,
I saw.
He said, is there any way, we're only changing a couple of sections, is there any way to do this? And I understand the dilemma, and if this works, I'm good with
It works to the extent that if 210 passes and this passes, you'll have everything that you want. And if one or neither pass, then it's going to be. But we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, we do. So this language says it's contingent on this statute being established.
Yeah, it only amends a bill as enacted. So if that bill is not enacted, then it's not amended.
And that's what it says?
But it is, but it does. The difficulty is that you on page 46 there, let's say that you don't get the Vermont Rental Housing Investment Program, but you still want to do some funding for the ADU navigation and such. You might want to break that out if you feel like you want to keep that on a separate track. But if you don't, if you want this all to move as one package in whatever vehicle it happens to be, then I would leave it how it is. You know,
Yeah, we're dependent upon the appropriation that's in S210 to fund even the ADUs. So, yeah, I think for now, I'm willing to take that risk that if it all goes up, we don't even get ADUs. So I think ADUs need to be a critical component of the vegan program. You're right. I think the most important thing you said is we have a long way to go. And, but this expresses our intent. We're saying in some ways that 210 is a technical corrections in terms of the government went ahead and did it without the law being passed, but everybody wanted the law to pass. So we're assuming that it will pass and that this will amend what was passed last year to give more emphasis on ADUs.
Right, and this is the only funding for ADUs we have is through VEDA.
Yeah, substantial, yeah.
I know, I'm just clarifying, because before, I think we had we thought about additional funding or not, it's always been through the VEDA program.
Yes, it's always been through the VEHIC program. What I continue to try and do, and people can override, is I'm trying to stay within the governor's numbers.
Right,
So-
and that's 20 million for this year, and it was 10 additional for the VA initially.
VAA,
10, 20 for FY '23. So I don't know why I thought there was 30 altogether.
no, I think VAA had $20 million in FY '22, and S210 has $20 million.
So we're 40 and not 30.
22 what?
So that's a total of 40 and not 30. It's 20, 20. I thought it was 10.
I
Anyway,
don't know that.
we
it has
should
that-
clarify
I don't know
that.
It has anything. We could look at
what the original proposal.
at S210, because Jane captured what the governor wanted in
Yeah.
that bill. And
I
I
should
think
know that.
it was just $20 million in FY '22. I don't know if it was. Well, it may have been more. I think it's smart, because it was like 7 originally and 5 they spent for this year, which they questioned the legality of. So I think there wasn't. Anyhow, let's just assume that it's $20 million in FY '22. So it's not in yellow, but because it was in yesterday's version, but if you look at the language on page 45, 46, it gets to the money issue and it gets to the money issue on statewide education navigation systems.
Yes, I see that it
And
does.
then everything else of that 25% of the 20, well, that's $5 million, which is allocated to ADUs. 80% of that $5 million, $4 million should be in financial incentives to the.
So instead of having a more local, anyway, Chris's shop will set up a navigational system for people interested in accessory dwelling units, and it'll be statewide. People we'll just need to market the bejesus out of it so that people can individually access it.
So David, on page 46 at the bottom, I thought I had another change. I want to make sure that 80% of this money went to the homeowners. Direct financial incentives. Could be other financial help they get, but I thought this language might be a little tight. So it says other supports.
Sorry, where are you?
On 10.1, page 46, at the very end, the very last
Oh,
substantive
the
section.
B, the department use.
That are remaining for accessory dwelling units for financial incentives. Or the financial support. I mean, I just don't want B to start slipping into softer stuff of education and
Marketing.
marketing.
Well, but marketing is
navigation.
they're gonna need to market a little bit because individuals and municipalities, I would hope, those that have planners and zoning people will hopefully let their communities know that a DHCD will have a navigator in place to help them.
So did you see my language and you just
I didn't see it.
Oh, okay. So I had written to, after the word financial, financial, financial incentives or other financial supports to homeowners developing accessory dwelling units. So essentially making sure that those other supports don't wind up going to the softer stuff. I mean, help the homeowner develop it with money. It may not be an incentive, maybe some other way, but I want to distinguish that from A.
Yeah, I think for some reason your PDF cut off, with the question you were starting to write about these two sections. It said what happens, and then my version cut off. I'm not sure why, so whatever.
Oh, okay, so there were other comments there
Aha,
too. I'll get to those two you got. Not many.
okay.
Oh no, you got that one. What happens? I see. So you missed the last page. That's
Aha, okay, that makes sense. No, I see.
all. I'll just give you this.
Thank you.
And then the other thing in section 33, obviously, we just talked about section 24 should take place upon passage. She'll take effect on passage.
So we had Maura on. She's still there. In case you said you spoke to Maura, did you want to change any language on the first generation section?
Yeah, so I tried to send that to you, David, and Allison, just knowing that those are the people here right now involved in the conversation. Maura and I had a chance to talk this morning and just confirm that right now the program is structured so that these are loans, and part of the issue that they've been having with first generation home buyers who lack significant wealth in their network is that a loan is still a significant barrier, and it would be helpful for that population if this was a forgivable loan or a grant. I'd like to lean toward a grant at this point and see what happens in the process as things move forward, and that it would be nice if there was an appropriation specific to getting this first generation home buyer grant program, an allocation of dollars specifically. So just reprioritizing things within the existing program still just gets people a loan. Maura can confirm that they do have the flexibility to depart upward on the amount. So that's an issue that we've addressed. But I personally would like to put a stake in the ground for, an appropriation specifically to help first generation home buyers receive a grant to access their first home purchase. I think of all the things that are transformational in building wealth and economic stability, it's helping someone be the first in their family to purchase a home.
So what's the average subsidy you're giving out under the first time home buyers assistance program now?
The maximum loan amount has long been $5,000 and the average has been around $4,700. A few months, maybe 6 months ago, we increased the loan amount to $10,000, but haven't seen the average amount go up a lot. And that's because in the past year, with home prices doing what they've done, our borrowers have not been able to buy homes. Our production is down considerably because they're being beat out by all cash offers. And so people who need mortgages, especially people of modest means who work with VHFA, first time buyers, have not been successful at getting the home when there's bidding wars and the like. So starting March 1st, we just increased the maximum loan amount to $15,000, but we haven't yet seen the average amount deployed increase because it's been a week that we've gone up.
Is the amount you give out, in addition to being subject to a cap, is that premised on the closing costs or? So.
Yes,
Cost,
it-
so closing costs, you say 4,700 is your average, that is the average amount of lawyers' fees, title insurance, all that stuff. That's what the loan is for, closing costs, right?
it's down payment and closing costs combined. And it's not that that's the total amount. It's, we give people the least amount that they need. So they're the last dollars in. So if we allow people to retain some assets, meaning we don't make them pay all their money in down payments, they can retain assets because we want them to have a chance to be able to fix the boiler once they buy the home and the rest. But then what they put down for down payment, there's also qualifications that limit how much people can get. So there's a loan to value ratio that lenders require. And a lot of times, and this is why the language that's being discussed now is so important, it's that people can't borrow more money. You could offer them $50,000 that we could loan them, but they could not use that because they won't qualify for the mortgage if they're borrowing $50,000 more dollars. They need some amount to be loaned dollars, which right now our cap is $15,000, and that's paid for through the state tax credit. But this additional money that I hear Senator Rom Hinsdale talking about would be a grant amount. And so it wouldn't affect the qualifications for the mortgage. And it would be a grant that a home buyer could receive if they're a first time home buyer.
So the present program was a non-interest loan payable upon resale
Or refinance.
or refinance. Okay. And have you had paybacks from some homes already?
Yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
revolving loan. It's a revolving fund is what it's designed to be, right? And
Yep.
because the initial request when Sarah was doing it was we needed to extend it to get it long enough so people were revolving and selling their homes again.
So if we turn part of this program, the first generation, to a grant program, you would be able to help fewer people because you have the money coming back.
Correct. And I believe that's why Senator Hinsdale is proposing that there be additional funds in as this grant so that it doesn't take away from the first-time home buyers who the legislature pledged to support in this revolving loan fund, but it provides an additional benefit to first-generation buyers over the next couple of years as we use that money.
And may I ask what, I know you have been thinking a little bit about this over the last bit because it's been being discussed. Do you have a notion of how much money would actually be impactful?
I would say that we do need to get the mortgage lender's attention. That if you did a $1 million program, I would phrase that as a boutique program because you can only help a handful of buyers, so they're not going to market it. And we're going to find the people who are eligible and help them. But a $5 million program could help. It depends on where you want to cap this. That could help 250 or 500 households. That is the scale of a program that would be worthwhile to market, deploy, train realtors and lenders on, and really build out and get the kind of splash that makes it worth it. I think it's a poor analogy, but the moving to Vermont incentive program that this committee has supported so much, I think saw some of that about a little bit of money. Well, it was very lucky with all the national press we got, but then, there's something about building a program larger so that it is a full program.
So 5 million gets us a real program that that it's worth your time to market and put some muscle behind.
Yes, and I will
I
say,
think education, I had that, education, didn't we have 5 million in this originally for that?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. So, yeah,
and those discussions that we've been having with the HCD and CHT, this was incorporated into that broader package of homeownership supports
Right.
that CHT has brought forward as well.
so, I mean, I hate to say this, and I know the House could do this further work if we could get this to the House. But we would also, in my humble opinion, want to keep them, because inevitably these houses will be sold, that we want to maintain going forward, just what we're doing with missing middle. We want to maintain that opportunity for this house to be affordable for the next, hopefully, first generation purchaser, or for whomever that is, so we want to, I would want to build in a perpetual piece of affordability into these houses as well.
I do not know how we would do that through this program as it's currently described. The down payment loan, again, it's a revolving loan so that home doesn't stay affordable, but when the money comes back to the $5,000 comes back,
It gives us more money, right?
we redeploy it. If this is a grant program, what you are doing is you're investing in Vermonters,
Right.
as opposed to investing in the Vermont home.
Right, I know, and I obviously support that hugely. Okay. Yes, thank you for differentiating that.
Because, and we're not putting a huge chunk of money in to drop the home price. They're kind of buying, something that works for them somewhat on the market instead of getting a huge discount that makes that equity piece
Okay,
make
thanks.
sense.
Thanks.
So you're saying 500 homes, that's based upon the $4,700 average going up. You're saying that's not a realistic number.
I was, I really do lean on the committee, but I was thinking about a $10,000 grant would be $5 million. That's 500 homebuyers assisted.
Right.
I also think it dovetails really nicely with the missing middle because, we're trying to bring more housing online. I remember because I introduced the bill for first time homebuyer tax credits originally, and we learned that helped people average income of about 61,000 in the pilot program. I feel like this could get at people in that lower end of the missing middle range, those folks at 80% of median household income at the $50,000 range, the folks that really this turns them into middle class homeowners. It creates more of a middle class.
And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I just want to reassure the committee that trajectory of who's been served through the existing down payment assistance program has held true for all the years of the program. And our average income buyer is right just under 70,000. It's moved from like 65,000 to maybe 67,000, but the average home price that they're buying is still well under $200,000. I could pull up those numbers in another minute, but it's a very, when you look at the data, it is overwhelming about the needs that it has been addressing.
Yeah. Well, we're big fans of this program that we created and feel so proud of. So it's, and one of our first beneficiaries was someone who worked in the State House.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So, we're at, I hate to keep raising the fact that we're trying to vote this bill out, and now we're talking about establishing a new $5 million program based upon a half hour of testimony.
Well, we chatted about it. I mean, we just haven't, we needed to get a better notion.
Well, I'm not, I have to say, this money in terms of, if we did this, is going to basically come out of VHCD's recommend. I'm going to give the VHCD a recommendation because I'm staying within the numbers that the governor has for housing. And but that aside, I'm less sympathetic to the fact that a loan we pay 10 or 20 years later when the house is sold is not enough incentive to get people in. I am concerned with Morris said about that it's not, this down payment assistance thing is not working for some people to get a further mortgage at this point. And even if you gave them $50,000, it wouldn't get the mortgage unless you say it's a grant versus a loan.
I mean, Maura may be able to say more about this, but, as a fairly recent home buyer, I mean, at some point, you hit a cap on how much people believe you can pay back each month. And, that's really challenging for people who are lower middle class. Having a grant says, okay, this is money that's already there as part of the down payment. This makes the loan work in a way that it meets your income level to repay. That's just a huge barrier for so many people who are trying to stay stable in the middle class.
And I thought it was a great idea when CHT brought it forward that to pair this as a package with the rest of the missing middle construction supports through shared equity, as well as the value gap, affordability gap proposal, because complementary, if all those things did pass, we are really addressing the problem. If one only increases down payment assistance, we are giving more money to borrowers to participate in a very broken market that they are prevented from accessing every time they lose out on an all cash offer or can't keep up with the bidding war. If we're able to bring new homes online that are affordable to them, and we give them some money to really make the home more affordable, and that we can reach lower income groups, we're sort of attacking that problem from both ends of the spectrum.
What's the difference between increasing the subsidy, let's say, in the missing middle program to making this a grant? I mean, the target population may be different, but what's the difference? I mean, it's an extra dollar saved for the purchaser. It doesn't have to be repaid.
Because in the missing middle program, we propose that as a permanent subsidy that stays with the home. And in this grant program, that is a permanent investment in a household who's that first generation home buyer. So it's the person or the structure. Which do you want to invest in?
I think we get that. And the missing middle is really about the structure, and this program is really about Vermonters.
So if we did what is in the bill now, it just gave priority to loans to first generation home buyers, you're saying nobody's coming to you for this money now, or very few people are coming to you for this money because they can't get a mortgage regardless of help with the down payment?
I am not positive that VHFA would be successful. We can prioritize. There's nothing that tells us who to prioritize now. So if we wanted to prioritize first generation buyers, we could. But right now we have enough money that we don't need to set up prioritization. The money is available. So prioritization is not the right tool to use in this situation. We don't need to prioritize. The needs of first generation buyers are grant funds as opposed to more loan dollars.
For first generation, it's grant funds, she says, are impactful, not loan dollars. Right. We may need to think about this to figure it out, because
do you see a lot of your, I mean, it doesn't sound like you're having to raise the amount of the loan to get people to even spend the money you have. Do you see the people who are coming in, do you see a differentiation between first time home buyers and first generation home buyers?
We currently don't collect information on if people are first generation buyers. We try our hardest to make this program as easy as possible. So we fall into all the typical mortgage loan documents and try not to add demographics and additional information. And so we would have to ask questions about when you were a youth, did your parents own their home or not? And that's not a typical mortgage application question. So I don't know how many people are first generation. I do know how many are first time. 100% of our DPA program are first time home buyers. That is in statute, and that's a limiting factor of this program.
So are you getting close to the point of coming to the legislature and saying, turn your first time home assistance program into a grant program if it's not working?
No, I'm not ready to say that our existing DPA program is not working. Right now, you're catching me in March, which is the low point of the home buying season. There's not as many homes sell in the winter. And so we are gearing up our program for the spring. And in doing so, that's why we increased the loan amount. We actually just cut our rates and did some other things to make our programs even more attractive, with hopes that this coming spring and summer, we will have stronger demand for VHFA's loans and the down payment assistance. But last year, if I look at last year's home buying season from mostly spring, summer, it was a slower season than we typically see because of the heat of the housing market. There weren't a lot of homes on the market. There just weren't homes for sale that were affordable to first-time borrowers, especially within VHFA's income limits. It's just, they missed in the last 2 years of home buying seasons, modest income Vermonters. They were locked out. And I don't know what this summer is going to hold, but if we have 3 years in a row of that, that really will impact our rental markets and everything else, because it's clogging the system if that churn and flow doesn't move more. So a program like this would help with that, as would constructing more affordable homes so that that inventory is there, which is why there's been such pressure to move both ends of construction and subsidy for individuals.
Right.
Well, it's not that unsympathetic, but I know I sound like a broken record and that we're up against a deadline here, but I'm certainly open to, more discussion about this on the House side, and be open to suggestions if they really are very reluctant to effectively start a new $5 million program in 1 hour. Yes.
So I understand that. I also understand, I'd want to do a quick graph in our brain of the money, which I'm beginning to get a sense of with the housing bill, which is different than economic development. Most of the VHCB money is not in this bill. The VHCB money is running separately.
Right.
So I think our asks, hi Randy, I think our asks here are in a little way independent of that. And maybe what a good point for us to consider for this morning is putting in a placeholder for this of 1 million and asking the House to really take this on and look at it more fully. Because I think this is a great piece. I know that our housing community supports, we're trying to look at how we make housing available for a whole range of people and incomes. This, Keisha and I introduced this bill. We're supporters of it, but I also know we've run out of time here. And I also know the House has more time, but if we can put in a placeholder that we can build on, I'd feel good about giving the House something to build on.
Yeah, I was just going to say 2 million, but I think we have started with pilots when we're not sure if first generation is, a completely different category of folks. But I do think something substantial to get this carved out would make sense. And as Allison said, I'm having a hard time looking at all the monies we're allocating and the highest and best use, but I just feel really strongly, that this would be a really valuable use of limited funds, because especially as Maura said, I hadn't quite thought about this, but we're really we're trying to help the missing middle, and that they have been missing from access to the homeownership market for so long. It really feels like an important way to jumpstart middle class stability in terms of anything housing related.
We may have to take a vote on this one. I would be willing to give the authority for $1 million to Maura to turn some of those grant loans into grants if in her wisdom she thinks that would make the program work for first generation people. I think I would want to take it out of the missing middle money. So just not, instead of their $15 million, they would get $14 million, and this would go to this group of people. So
I could live with that.
Yeah.
okay, well, we'll have to explain it to the other members of the committee and see how they feel about it. But we could draft something up in that regard and maybe have it ready for the vote on 11:30. I would like to, we've gone through a lot of pieces, Senator Brock, of just the changes. I think that were not major consequences except this last one, which we'll talk about. But I held off on for you, the one change that I'm suggesting in the residential contractor piece, to get closer to the governor, I've raised the contract price from 3,500 to 5,000. That's the only change.
My sense is it will still be a poison pill.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
That's a concern.
We'll see. Well, a long way to go.
Yeah.
So let's take a break. We can try and explain to you what this last conversation was about.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rahm and Maura, on that. We'll break until 10:45, and we'll come back with another draft of this if David is available, like at 11:30, and we'll. Problem is we need David to draft it. We also need him to walk us through the economic development bill. So we'll see how far. I mean, other than the missing middle language, David, do you think you? I know you draft while we're chattering, so.
Yeah, no, I think that's the only thing that I need to redo, right? I mean, I need to add a couple other tweaks, little
Yeah,
small
tweak.
things.
Yeah.
So I can do that quickly. I think, can you indulge me 1 minute of time on that?
Absolutely.
If other people are here, that's good, because I just want to make sure I say it back to you correctly. So I think I got my head completely wrapped around that now. And namely, 35% is going to be the maximum amount of the building subsidy we're going to give through this program. It's going to be split in some way between developer and buyer.
Exactly.
The cap for the developer's portion of the subsidy is limited to the difference in what you've been calling the value gap, the cost of building and the assessed value. So if it's a $300,000 house, $100,000 is the maximum amount of the subsidy to this program. If it assesses for $250,000, the most the developer could get would be $50,000. So if there's a residual from that, from what could be allocated to the developer, the rest would be available to go to the buyer. And as I've been thinking about it, 2 and 3 are not, the function of that is not to limit the value of the subsidy to the buyer, but rather the mechanism, right?
Right.
So the amount of money available to the buyer will always be whatever is left over from that third of the project cost, but it may manifest either as a direct subsidy to that buyer between agency and buyer in some sort of legal construct that requires perpetual affordability, or it could manifest as a shared equity model with a 75% requirement. But the amount of the buyer subsidy would always be the same. It's just the mechanism that's the difference in the possibility between 2 and 3. And the third leg of the stool is if is this perpetual affordability for future income eligible buyers, which would have to attach to whatever buyer subsidy flows to the purchaser of the property. Do I have all that right?
You do.
Great.
And to put it, part of the problem, I think, is I tried to work with language that the administration gave. It might not have been the best construct, but essentially, we've taken the administration's proposal on the cap of 35% overall, and basically said that for the direct subsidy to the construction, it's what they've always asked for. It's the value gap, giving that. And then for whatever else they can find in the package, it's the value gap, up to the value gap. They may get a construction person and say, I'll take less than that value gap. I don't know, but it's up to that value gap. And then if there's money left over within that 35%, it goes to the buyer in a form of subsidy light or perpetual affordability light or perpetual affordability heavy, which is what has been done up to date, but there's a light version of this. And that's the choice of Maura in terms of, she looks at the buyer and says, what do you want to do? You know, you can do it this way or that way. So that's the only real change. Great. And it's a work in progress. So people, I know some people are not happy with what I've suggested. But,
Yeah.
okay.
Let me do this stuff quickly and I'll come back to you.
Okay.